Hello, this is Dr. Victoria Skirbo speaking to you from the Seeds of Transformation Healing Center in Wareham, Massachusetts. I want to talk to you today about the astrology and Kabbalah of the month of June 2018. Okay, so as always, we start the month by looking at the vibration that the month holds. And here we have June, which is the 6th month. And then we add it to the universal year of 11. Remember, we are in a master number year. 11 is about balance, but it is also about the extremes. It's about duality, and yet it's about togetherness. 11 is a vibration of relationship. And so we are fostering our relationships this year. We're honing our relationships. We're learning to relate in better ways, although sometimes it may not feel that way. If we add the 6 and 11 together, we get the vibration of a 17. And if we add the 1 and 7 together, we get the 8 vibration. Now, 8 is always a number of karma. It's a number of as you sow, so shall you reap. And so we will find ourselves in the month of June reaping the rewards, quote, rewards, of actions taken prior to the month of June. The 17-8 vibration is connected to the star card in the tarot. And here in the star card we have the woman, and she is pouring out water into water and onto the earth. Now, this star card is connected to the sign of Aquarius, and oftentimes Aquarius is mistaken for a water sign when in case of fact it is an air sign. It is actually the third and final air sign in the zodiacal wheel. Air is all about relationship and relating. And so in Gemini, where incidentally the sun is this month, we have our relationship to our immediate environment. In Libra, the next of the air signs, we have our relationship to the other. In fact, it's Libra that we first realize that there are other people about in our lives. Before that, all the other signs prior to Libra were really a more subjective experience in creating our sense of who we are and what's important to us and what's around us and who's our family and what's our creation and how we can best serve. It is in Libra that we come out into the wider world and we learn to relate to other people, and sometimes other people very different from ourselves. And then of course we have Aquarius, the last of the air triplicity, and it is in Aquarius that we relate to the group or the collective. And so the water that's being poured onto the earth, which of course is our earthly nature, and the water, which is our emotional nature, is all of the accumulated knowledge of humanity. The key phrase for Aquarius is, I know. So for those of you who know Aquariuses, they know a lot, and they'll be the first ones to tell you. The star card is one in which it's connected to the sign of Aquarius, as I said, and so we have to look to see what is in Aquarius this month. And in point of fact, Mars is in Aquarius, and Mars is in Aquarius all month. In fact, Mars will be going retrograde on June 26th, which is significant, at 10 degrees of Aquarius, and will be retrograde until August 26th. Actually, Mars is in Aquarius for around 153 days of the 165 days of the year, and so we have a lot of time spent in Aquarius. Mars is our ability to take action. It's our instinctual nature. In Aquarius, our instinct is to do what is right for the common good. We are concerned with others. We are concerned with the collective, with the whole group. Okay? And so that's important. We also have Mars making a conjunction to the south node of the moon. That's occurring on June 8th. The south node of the moon is in Aquarius. That's something else that's in Aquarius. And the south node is about letting go and releasing. With Mars there, there's a lot of action in that area. Now, it can be a lot of action to release, especially as Mars goes retrograde, and we have to really consider our actions and what needs to be let go of and what doesn't. Aquarius is also connected with trauma, and so in Aquarius we can identify with our trauma. And of course Mars can create trauma. So we have to be really careful that we don't re-traumatize ourselves in the way that we have in the past. Aquarius is also the sign of friendship, and so we could connect with old friends, perhaps resolve some issues that we may have had at that time, or just see people that we love and we still feel a kinship to. So there can be a lot of action around old friends. You might find yourself doing some, what do you call those, reunions, class reunions and such would be a good expression of that energy. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at the Tree of Life. Okay, so here we are on the Tree of Life, and the star card falls on this path right here. And this is the path that connects Yesod with Netzach. Now, Netzach is the Sephiroth connected with our desire nature. It is connected to the planet Venus. It is the Sephiroth of Venus. Here we have our emotions, our instincts, our desires. And then here in Yesod we have the moon. The moon is connected with Yesod. Yesod is foundation. It's in Yesod that we come to understand our feeling nature. It is a highly creative space. It is connected to, and it is within the middle pillar, which deals with transformation. The path between Venus and the moon is this Aquarian star path. It is connected with the Hebrew letter Zadi, which means fishhook. Zadi is Tzaddi. Oftentimes when things are when we're dealing with this vibration, meditation is a wonderful tool to connect with the cosmos. And Zadi is a symbol of putting the fishhook into the water to accumulate knowledge. Fish are always symbolic of knowledge. In fact, in the Celtic tradition, the salmon is the oldest being and it holds the wisdom. And interestingly enough, salmon makes us very smart because of all the omega-3s in salmon. You know, maybe they knew more than we thought they knew, right? Okay. So the other thing that's interesting about this combination and this path being activated is that both the moon and Venus are feminine archetypes. Okay, the moon is usually connected with the mother, the nurturing parent. Venus is connected with the feminine or the yin, attractive magnetic force. And so we will hear a lot about women in June. We will see women coming into their power. We will see women expressing their will and their desires and their needs and what emotionally sustains them and what needs to be healed. The path connects the solar plexus, which is our personal will, and the sacral chakra, which deals with, among other things, our physical creativity, our emotional intelligence, our need to connect with others in a sexual way. It is also the place where we must maintain healthy boundaries in order to stay healthy. And so all of these issues can come up. And this is really about being in the body this month. We are in the body. We are in the lower chakras. Okay? Okay, so the star card, it says up here, the star is follow your own star to find your star. Meditate upon your own nature. At the center of your true self, a great secret will be revealed. A great secret is the key to your creative powers. This is from The Spirit of the Tarot by Pamela Eakins. It's a wonderful book, a wonderful tarot deck. She does a lot of work with the Tree of Life and that, so it's one of my favorites. Okay, so I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of the astrological things that will be going on this month. I'll be right back to do that. Because Venus is activated through its connection to Netzach on the Tree of Life, there are a couple of important Venus aspects occurring on this month. The first one was actually June 1st and June 2nd. We had a trine to first Jupiter and then Neptune. The very first couple of days of June have a grand water trine in the sky, and it is connecting Neptune and Venus and Jupiter. Now, Venus will move out of that grand trine, but any other planet that moves into Cancer will be part of that grand trine. And so as we move through June and then July, as planets move into Cancer, they will recreate that grand trine. The grand trine is also activated by Pluto. We have Pluto at around 20 degrees of Capricorn, and that's close enough to activate that grand trine. And grand trines can sort of sit in the background and we don't necessarily do anything with them, although we'll certainly feel very sensitive and emotional with it. But they don't necessarily cause activity. They don't cause us to make changes or do things. They sort of sit like background noise. But when a planet comes in to activate a grand trine, that's when things happen. And Pluto is a very powerful planet to activate anything. Pluto in Capricorn is dealing with our issues around power and self-empowerment, feelings of powerlessness, and how do we move through that? How do we transform that? How do we become responsible for ourselves? There's one thing that we need to speak our truth. We need to point out when somebody has trespassed against us. That is our right, and that needs to happen. Once that happens, however, we cannot define ourselves by our trauma. We cannot define ourselves as a victim. This is really about sort of changing that victim, perhaps to the sense of survivor and then ultimately thriver, because it is the most challenging things in our lives that seem to turn our lives in the most wonderful directions if we allow it to happen, if we let go of the emotions, the resentment, the resentfulness, the bitterness. All of that has to be gone in order for us to actuate ourselves. Everything serves a purpose on some level, and people go through a lot of really terrible things, so it's hard to say that and not understand that some people would get upset with that. But I truly believe in my own life that you're never given more than you can handle. And luckily we get more than one lifetime to work these things out. So be gentle with yourselves at the same time as we need to heal ourselves. There's also the opposition of Venus to Pluto, and that occurs on June 5th. Actually, I'm recording this on the 4th, so that's tomorrow. And this is part of a lunation cycle, a synodic cycle between Venus and Pluto. And Venus and Pluto made a conjunction on January 9th. That was the same day, Venus, the Sun, and Pluto all conjoined together. I believe it was 20 degrees of Capricorn, I believe. And that is the whole, that's the Persephone myth, and Venus goes down into the underworld, okay, and marries Pluto. And before, Persephone was a princess. She was sort of like floating and walking through the gardens, the fields. She was pure and innocent, and she was abducted by Pluto, who brought her down to the underworld. And her mother, Ceres, was so brokenhearted, or Demeter, depends on which pantheon we're talking about. The myth is the same. Was so brokenhearted that she stopped producing grain, because she's the goddess of the grain. And Zeus had to intercede. But Zeus really couldn't intercede, so he sent down Mercury, because none of the other gods could go down into Hades. And so he said, look, you gotta... Demeter is brokenhearted. Everybody on the planet is dying. You have to do something. So they made an agreement that she would spend half her time in the underworld, I believe it was half, and half in the outer world. And she became the queen of hell. And she went from being a virginal princess to a queen, because she faced her shadow. And that is what is happening at this time. I mean, we as women are always facing something like this. I mean, it's actually our reality more than it's... I don't know anybody who doesn't have that, quite frankly, have some sort of story about this. But it is facing our shadow and finding our power within it. The underworld is dark, and it can be scary, but it's also rich in resources and resourcefulness. And so as Venus makes its opposition to Pluto, she comes out into the light of day and says, this is my power. I am taking my power. I am through osmosis. I am taking my power, and I am going to go out into the world. And that's what Venus is going to be doing in the second half of her synodic cycle. However, there is Venus retrograde that occurs in Scorpio, incidentally, and it's in Scorpio and Libra. So that's in the fall. It's in the fall, later fall. So we'll see. We'll talk about it at that time. But all the same, there is a sense of the women coming up and rising up. We also have Venus opposite Mars that actually occurs on the summer solstice, interestingly enough, the height of the sun, right, the longest day. And we have it, of course, in Aquarius. Mars is in Aquarius and Venus is in Leo. Venus in Leo doesn't suffer any fools, so this is about awareness, and about awareness in our relationships to the other, our relationships just in general. And when we're dealing with Leo and Aquarius, we're dealing with love. We're on the axis of love. In Leo, it's very subjective, it's very personal. In Aquarius, it's very impersonal and objective. And so there is a balance there and an awareness around that. And how do we share our talents and abilities with the collective? That's the question we're going to be asking ourselves with that opposition. There's also, on the 14th of January, there's a square between Venus and Uranus. Now, Venus will be in Leo, and Uranus, of course, is in Taurus. It's a first quarter square, crisis in action. We feel the need to take an action, okay? And it's about breaking free and breaking out of conditioning. But what's especially potent about this is that Venus is the ruling planet of Taurus. And so with Venus in Leo square Uranus in Taurus, there is an even furthering of the energy of the feminine rising and breaking free from the constraints that both society and our own sense of disempowerment and fear has bred within us. So I really feel like June is going to be very much about the rising of the power of the feminine. We also have, this occurred last month, and I don't think I talked about it. I'm actually, quite frankly, wasn't quite aware of it, but I am now, that Lilith is making a conjunction to Pluto. So that further sort of boosts that feminine energy. All right, I want to talk about what's going on with the moon and the lunations, and I want to talk about the first day of summer. I will be right back. So we have a new moon and we have a full moon in the month of June. The new moon occurs on June 13th, and it occurs at 23 degrees of Gemini. And what's interesting about the new moon, now first of all, new moons are always about new beginnings, new starts, planting seeds. Gemini deals with how we think, how we gather information. Gemini is also a trickster energy, so we never really know what's going to happen with Gemini. But what's interesting about this new moon is actually conjunct the Sun, the North Node, and Uranus in the chart of the president, the 45th president of the United States, Donald Trump. And so on a certain level, he is getting a boost from this new moon. I don't know what that means, but there's something there. But because it's conjunct Uranus as well, there can be disruption. Now, I say that and everybody's laughing because that's all it's really been, is disruption. So I don't know what's going to happen with Uranus. You never really know. The other thing is that the Mars in the chart of the United States, I use the Sagittarius rising chart, the Sibley chart, when I look at the chart of the United States. There's also a Gemini rising chart. It occurs at it's on the same day. It's just a different time. So whichever chart that you work with, Mars is at around 20, 21, 22 degrees of Gemini. In the Sibley chart, it's in the 7th house of open enemies, and in the Gemini rising chart, it's in the 1st house. Either way, it's Mars in Gemini, and so we do have to be very mindful that we do not get caught up in another altercation. Mars in Gemini is very dualistic, doing two things at once. And Gemini is also the pinnacle of duality, so we can see a further split within the country. So just be aware of that. It sort of brings up our more martial energy in America, which there's plenty of. We don't really need any, in my estimation, we don't really need any more. We need to understand the root causes of some of our issues around our masculinity in this country. Okay, so that's happening. Now we also have a full moon, and that is occurring. One second, I'll be right with you as soon as I can find it on my thing. Okay, here we go. We have a full moon on, looks like June 28th. We have the moon is in Capricorn and the sun is in Cancer. The Capricorn Cancer full moon is awareness around our sense of security. It's actually the sun and moon are square Chiron in Aries. Chiron moved into Aries in April, and so there are issues around identity and our wounds around our own identity. In fact, the United States has a Chiron in Aries in its natal chart. It's around 20, 21 degrees of Aries, so we have a time before we get to that in this country, before we have another Chiron return. But we have awareness here. Now, what's interesting about this is that the moon is actually conjunct Saturn in this chart. And this is serious. And this, the moon in a mundane chart is the people, and Saturn conjunct it is going to bring some. Saturn can bring constriction, but it can also force us to become responsible for ourselves. So there will be constriction and a certain amount of constriction and blockage for us, and yet it will strengthen our resolve to become responsible for ourselves and to take the actions necessary. Remember, this is an 8-month, and so it's about karma, but it's also about taking responsibility for yourself, prioritizing your life, looking at things very realistically. So it is it's a challenging time. We continue to be in a challenging period of time. That's not going to change. We have to become more aware of what it is that feeds our souls and what we need to do to help one another to move through this time, so that we can come out on the other side of this stronger, better, more whole, more actuated, and more loving. The other thing I want to talk about is on, of course, the 21st of June, we have the summer solstice. And I just want to say one thing about that. When the sun goes into Cancer, I believe it's the next day, or maybe the next day after that, immediately it will square Chiron, because Chiron is just at it looks like 2 degrees 20 minutes on in the chart of the solstice. And so right away, and it is a first quarter square, so it's a crisis in action. And so we are all going through an identity crisis. Who are we? What do we stand for? Where do we want to put our energy? As all the things that we were able to sort of depend on seem to fall away. And so we have to ask ourselves, who are we? And how are we going to survive this? Both Aries and Cancer are survival archetypes. Okay, Aries is I want to be alive. Cancer is I want to be secure, and I want my family to be safe and secure. And you can't actuate yourself unless those things are taken care of. So that will come up for us. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the Mars retrograde. Mars goes retrograde at 10 degrees of Aquarius, and I'm going to read, see if you can, I don't know if you can see this, but I'll read it for you. The Sabian symbol for 10 degrees of Aquarius says, a man who for a time became the embodiment of an ideal is made to realize that he is not. The need to deal with human beings as people. The other thing that's interesting about this is that if we look at Mars being in Aquarius and we look to the ruling planet of Aquarius, we have to go to Uranus. And Uranus, of course, is in Taurus. And Uranus is actually now at 2 degrees of Taurus. And the Sabian symbol for that is an electrical storm. And the meaning is the cosmic power able to transform the implications of natural existence. And the key word is the visitation. And so part of the journey, I believe, of June will be to look at each other as human beings and not just projections of our own shadow. We need to really sort of sit with ourselves and sit with each other and do the best that we can. Meditate, go inside. It doesn't sound like June is going to be a quiet month, but it's actually, to a certain extent, the calm before the storm of the eclipses next month. And so do your best. Meditate as often as you can. If you're a woman, empower yourself. Do something to empower yourself. If you're a man, do something to nurture your feminine side. That will empower you as a full person. We're not just males and females. We are both. And both sides need to be nurtured and loved. Perhaps the male side needs to be forgiven and the female side needs to have its time of anger, but also its time of empowerment. Anger is a great way to get things moving, but we can't sustain ourselves on it. It needs to become something else. It needs to become that creative power where we can create and then further come to understand each other. And we get an opportunity to do some deep soul searching in this month, and I think it's time well spent. I hope you enjoy this video. I know the technical aspects aren't that good, but the information, I believe, will be helpful to you. So if you do enjoy these videos, press the like button, become a subscriber on my YouTube channel. I do the monthlies every month. I try to get them out before the month starts, but it been a crazy couple of days. And if you'd like a reading, when I do readings, I do evolutionary astrology along with Kabbalah and Numerology, so it's a little bit different. And it's a very profound, and it can be life-changing reading for you. So if you want to contact me for one of those, please contact me at my website, theseedsoftransformation.com. That's the easiest way. And I hope to connect with you, and I will see you again next month in July, the eclipse month. Ciao.